Welcome back to ABC, the amazing beauty of creation. Now we've been away for some time, Talha. Things have been hectic, and we haven't been doing much recordings.
Mhm.
But people have been asking, and we've been under pressure from people who enjoyed the podcast to actually keep recording. So I think now we're going to be more consistent about it. We're going to try and release an episode at least every week. Okay, so what are we talking about today? Today we're talking about the bees. One of the most amazing creations is the bees, tiny as they are. So amazing, in fact, that Allah Ta'ala chose to name an entire surah of the Quran after them. So Surah Nahl is the 16th surah of the Quran, and this one is named after specifically the honeybee. So that's the one thing. And inside the surah there's a couple of mentions about the miracle of the honeybee. Allah Ta'ala says, وَأَوْحَى رَبُّكَ إِلَى النَّحْلِ أَنِ اتَّخِذِي مِنَ الْجِبَالِ بُيُوتًا وَمِنَ الشَّجَرِ وَمِمَّا يَعْرِشُونَ. So this verse means that Allah Ta'ala has awha. Allah Ta'ala used the word awha. Awha is usually used for inspiration. So your creator inspired the honeybee that it needs to create its home, meaning hives, in the mountains, in homes. Buyutan means homes, basically any structure created by humans. Wamina shajari, and in the trees. Wamimma ya'rishun, and in the trellises. Now the trellises are those structures that you'll typically find in grape farms that actually hold the grapevines up. So the bees have received inspiration. Now we can translate that inspiration further into instinct. So instinctively the bees have been taught to create to make their hives in mountains and structures, trees, trellises, etc. So we understand here that the act of making those hives is inspiration. It is instinct. It is something that the bees have been taught. And the way that the hives are constructed, the shapes in which they are constructed, the way in which they are run and managed, they're almost like beautiful little cities. You know, we talk about green cities. We talk about cities that are eco-friendly. So the beehives are already there. They're eco-friendly, they are efficient, they have so much going on in there. But I'm not going to get into all of that right now, because we're going to do that over the next few episodes, aren't we, Tala?
Absolutely. There's just so much to talk about bees. It would be an injustice to them to try and squeeze it all into one episode.
Okay, so where do we start then?
Let's talk about the different types of bees you get in a hive.
Okay, so there's different types of bees, right? I see a bee, I know one thing, run. So you mean that I'm looking at different types of bees at different times?
Not exactly. And let me explain. So I think the previous episode we did about ants.
Mm-hmm.
So in a beehive, the structure of bees has some resemblance to that. For example, the ones that you see flying out and about, those are the worker bees, just like how the ants that you see running around will be the worker ants. Now, the worker bee is the most common type of ant. So the one that you're running from, those are all worker bees.
Bees, you mean? You said ants.
Sorry, bees. Now, just like ants, the worker bees are all female. So it seems like in the insect world, the females are all hard workers. Okay. But these females also do not lay any eggs. Now, that right is reserved exclusively for queens, which we'll discuss a bit later. Now, the jobs of the worker bees are basically everything in the hive. So from cleaning the hive, from caring for the young, from caring for the queen, to going out and scavenging for food, so finding flowers to collect pollen and nectar from. And the worker bees also build the hive, so they create the substance called beeswax, and they use those to construct the hives. But I think we'll talk about the hives and the hive construction in a future episode.
I'm curious about where exactly does the beeswax come from, but I guess we're gonna discuss that.
Yeah. Now, the worker bee, their lifespan can vary greatly depending on the season. See, in the winter, when the bees, they slow down, they're not as busy going out foraging for food, they can live for up to 6 months. But in the summer, when the work demand goes up, they generally live for around 6 weeks.
6 weeks?
So their lifespan gets shortened quite a bit. They literally work themselves to death.
Yikes.
Okay. Then the second type of bee you'll get is the drones. Now these are all the male bees. And they are the biggest bee in the colony. But they don't have any stingers, so they rely on the worker bees for protection. And their main job is to mate with new queens as they fly out of the hive to start their own colonies, their own hives. Just like how ants have a similar role.
So where do the drones come from? Are they children of the queen?
The children of the queen.
Okay,
yes.
Okay.
Now the queen is by far the most interesting species of bee in the hive. Each hive only has one active queen. Now when a new queen hatches in the hive, then they'll fly out. They'll mate with the drones and they'll fly out to start their own colonies. There can only be one queen in a hive. Now, queen bees only mate once in their life. They live for about 5 years, so they have the longest lifespan out of most bees. And she, once again, is the only female that has the privilege of laying eggs, or the ability to lay eggs. And she lays quite a bit of eggs. In the summer, she can lay up to 1,500 eggs a day. And during her whole lifetime, during a year, if she's operating at capacity, she can lay up to 500,000 eggs. Just one queen bee, 500,000 eggs every year. So, if you think about their lifespan is 5 years, so she can lay well over 1 million eggs during her lifetime.
Well, if it's 500,000 a year, you're looking at least 2.5 million in a 5-year lifespan. Amazing.
Yeah, and all that is from mating once. So, she also she's the matriarch of the hive. So her job is to coordinate everything. All the worker bees sort of report to her in a way, but not verbally like how humans would do, but she produces pheromones that unifies the hive, and those pheromones is how bees communicate with one another, similar to how an ant structure would work.
So how exactly do those pheromones work? Are they some kind of chemicals that the other bees perceive somehow?
They're chemical that the bees will release into the air, and it's sensed, like I think it's smelt by other bees, and that's how they figure out what to do. And especially if the queen, then they'll know that they have new orders or...
Interesting. So basically smell signals.
Smell signals. Okay. Now, queen bees, when they hatch, they are just like any other bee. They look exactly the same. There's no difference, at least that we can detect. But certain larvae, bee larvae, will be collected by the worker bees, and they'll be fed this special substance called royal jelly. It's a special. It's unlike honey. It's a separate type of extract that the bees produce, and they feed this to those larvae, and it causes those larvae to, instead of growing into regular bees, they will grow and develop into queen bees.
So wait, how does that actually happen? Is the choice random, or do they actually instinctively know that these are queens in the making?
It's something that we are yet to understand. To us, the bees look exactly the same, but the bees seem to know which ones to collect and which ones to feed the royal jelly.
Okay.
But we have no understanding into their world yet, in that sense. Right, now, if a queen, she has a hard life also. She has to keep laying eggs, to keep the hive healthy, and to keep a fresh supply of worker bees coming. And if she starts lacking, if she stops laying eggs, the worker bees will kill her. Because she's now a threat to the hive.
Wow. Okay.
So she has, although she's the queen, the matriarch, she also has a job. And if she's not doing that job, then there's no purpose to keep her around.
Wow, there's no mercy in there, is there?
There isn't. And what will happen is she will be killed, and a new queen will be bred to replace her. And that queen will now take the role as the matriarch of the colony.
Okay, so clearly there's a shift of power that happens there, right? So the queen is not doing her responsibilities. She is normally controlling the hive. And if she's not doing her work, that means somebody else is taking control under specific conditions. All right. I mean, what does it mean that the bee is not, the queen bee is not doing her work? What are the criteria, to say that the queen is lacking in some way, and then who makes that decision? It's strange. It's strange the kind of hierarchy that Allah Ta'ala has placed, and that understanding the place, because I mean, we as humans still grapple with that. We appoint leaders, the leaders don't do their work, and then we sit and we debate for years and years and years about what are the action plans that we need to be taking. I mean, we're seeing that all over the world today. But I'm not saying we've got to kill our leaders, not like that, like the bees. But I mean, what are the action plans? They have a very decisive way of dealing with the leadership crisis inside the hive. Sorry, I'm going into politics and leadership, but I'm amazed. I'm amazed that these little creatures that have brains the size of what? Pinheads, that have this level of organization and structure. Yeah. So that means the control power shifts from the queen to whoever else is making the decision, and then shifts back to the new queen when the new queen comes about. And then the loyalty of the hive is to the new queen now. So you don't get revolt, you don't get civil war in there.
Yeah. But it's quite a brutal way that the new queen is selected. You see, when they pick those certain larvae to feed royal jelly to, they don't just pick one, they'll pick quite a few. And they'll cultivate them all in like the same vicinity. And if one of those larvae finally emerge and turns to a bee, she'll go and kill all the other larvae. And that's how she'll become queen. But if two emerge at the same time, two or more emerge at the same time, then they battle to the death.
Okay.
And then the winner becomes the new queen.
Wow, amazing. So that ensures that the stronger one, that's just Allah Ta'ala's way of ensuring the strongest one dominates.
Yeah.
Okay, what else do you have for us?
Okay, and then just one little fact to close up. Sometimes bees, they'll form what's called a swarm. You see, if a beehive becomes overpopulated, where there's too many worker bees now around it, too much for the hive to sustain, what will happen is the queen will leave with about half the population of the hive, and they'll go and start a new colony somewhere else, a new hive somewhere else. That's called a swarm. And then the current hive will still survive, but they'll just cultivate a new queen, and they'll continue. So
as if the queen has died.
As if the queen has died. So if the hive becomes overpopulated, they basically just split the population into two hives.
Okay.
And continue.
That swarms are actually quite terrifying. I've seen one in a farm somewhere, and that you just hear that humming noise coming from nowhere. And
it's a couple thousand bees migrating all at once.
Yeah.
You don't want to get caught between them and their destination.
Okay. All right. Awesome. So it's a wrap for today's episode. Catch us next week for the next episode about the bees, which is going to cover what aspects, Tala?
In the next episode, we'll go more in depth about the hive of the bees, what it's made of, how it's built.
Wow, that's amazing. That's one for the engineers and architects. Mm-hmm. Awesome.